I am thrilled to have a guest tonight that this is a gentleman I've known personally. We met back in 2011 at an event where we both spoke in Amsterdam, and I immediately thought this is a man not just of a great research capability, but a man of real integrity, and also just a genuinely great guy. Someone who's humble, but yet forthright, a truth seeker, like all the good researchers are out there, like you listening, I'm sure. And he got his background really is not in the area, at least as far as I can tell, that he's really focusing on these days. But the thing about Peter Levenda is he's brilliant. He's been around the block of life enough times to know quite a bit. And I really want to welcome my guest for tonight and for the rest of the show, Peter Levenda. Peter, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for that introduction. It's stunning. I'm gonna print that out and tape it to my wall.
I was winging it because I don't even have a bio in front of me, but I thought, we could do this.
There you go.
It's funny. I have the one book of yours that I've had for years. That is a fabulous book, in my opinion, is Unholy Alliance, subtitled A History of Nazi Involvement with the Occult. And you did that book quite a while ago, I believe.
The first edition came out in 1994. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I think my edition's a bit later than that. So you've been in the research field in, I don't know if that's really called the fringe or not. Maybe we can get into that later. But it's certainly, even like within the academic field, people who study the Nazis, even today, like not many people really get into the occult aspect of the Nazis, at least in my own experience.
No, that's been relatively recent. Actually, the Nazi occult thing really runs parallel in terms of its popularity and its fringe nature with UFO studies, let's call it. And for me, for such a long time, the only books that were available on Nazi occultism, if you consider that a phrase, were books that were purely speculative. Morning of the Magicians, I think, is the famous one. In 1960, that book came out and talked a lot about that interface between occultism and the Nazis.
Oh, I see.
So, kind of started, but it remained fringe because there was no real original research being done. No one wanted to touch it. And then Nicholas Goodrick Clark in England, who passed away a few years ago in his 50s, a very sad loss for us all. He wrote a definitive book as well on Nazi occultism from a scholarly point of view. He was a professor in England, and and that was like the other guy, So it was him and it was me, and we tag teamed basically, on History Channel shows, on Hitler and the Nazis. You would have 15 minutes with Dr. Goodrick Clark, and there'd be 15 minutes with Peter Levenda, and we would reference each other's works to the point where producers would ask us, who's good in the UK, and I would say, well, Goodrick Clark, and they'd ask him, and he'd say, well, Peter Levenda, and that was it. We were the only two writing in English, I think, that really approached it from on the basis of primary sources, on the basis of actual texts,
it's
of the German documents themselves. Yeah,
I want to get into your connection with Tom DeLonge and TTSA and everything connected with that. But I just want to ask one thing relating to the Nazis and the occult before we do that, and anything else that really you like to discuss in your own background and your very impressive research history. But there was one book I read even before I encountered your book by I think a man named John Brennan, called, I think, Hitler and the Occult or something like that. Did you ever come across that book?
I mean, I probably did. It doesn't ring a bell at the moment. I read a lot of books like that. So
I think this was one of those speculative books, but it was from, I think, the 70s. And that was actually my first encounter. And then I encountered your work and I thought, oh, okay, here's the guy who actually does it with some serious research. And but that's just how you are. You're a very careful researcher. And if I just may offer my own perspective, I get the idea, or at least I could imagine, that a lot of people would love to take some of your research much farther than you might be willing to take it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can see that you're someone who's very meticulous, very careful. You don't like to overreach. You don't like to jump to conclusions that you feel are not warranted by the evidence. I think that's a fair statement about you. And
Absolutely.
I can imagine that you encounter people pretty frequently who might want to take your research and run with it. Is that true?
Oh yeah, all the time. Especially the producers of the shows I've been on with the History Channel. I mean, everybody's always trying to get you to make the extra to reach out and further than the evidence will allow you. And I'm
right.
My whole thing is, I want people to be comfortable in the facts. If they want to speculate on their own, that's fine. But I want to present as many of the facts as possible that I can find and say, look, the truth is really stranger than fiction. If you really look at, the actual documents themselves, in this case, the Nazis, they generated a lot of documents on this subject that nobody bothered looking at. And, when I found them at the archives, I was stunned. And I'm thinking, how come nobody's been here? Because it's all there. And I wanted people to know that I'm not writing about speculative stuff. I'm not really speculating unless I say that I am within the context. But
right, it may feel sensational, but it's not speculative.
Right, it might be sensational, but yes, right. Absolutely, it's not speculative. Speculation is just too easy, and it's really the work of fiction authors, I think, more than nonfiction. And I try to keep things, on a certain level.
Well, this is one reason that I think I relate to you so well. I remember when we met in 2011, I thought, yes, this is a guy. I really felt that we were kindred spirits, if I may be so bold.
So I agree. No, 100%. I mean, your work is the same way. I mean, you're writing on the basis of documentation, So, I mean, to me, that's where you start. Primary sources, man. I mean, you start with the good stuff and, you can weave a story and a narrative around it. But as long as you're separating your speculation from the facts, that's fine. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Could not have said it better. So I wonder if I can ask you some questions about TTSA. This is really, has just dominated the UFO field for really almost the last year, and you're very much part of this. And there's just so much controversy and so much enthusiasm and so much skepticism and so much support and attack, everything associated with this initiative. A lot of hot air, radio. And there's, I think, genuine holes in our knowledge as well that a lot of people would like to have filled. And it occurred to me, like, you're in such a good position, maybe not to answer every single question. You can't speak for other people. I understand that. But nonetheless, I imagine you've got a good perspective on many of the things going on with TTSA, that is To the Stars Academy, or organized by Tom DeLonge. And I just thought this is a great opportunity to talk about some of that. I guess the first thing I would ask you is, how did you get connected to Tom DeLonge to begin with?
Well, it was pretty weird. It was the fall of 2014. And I think it was an email that I got. I think it was an email first, then it turned into a phone call. But there was an email that said, hi, I'm Tom DeLonge and blah, blah, blah. And I want to do this thing. And, and I'm thinking, where did that come from? And, I recognized the name and I knew the band Blink-182. And I thought this was just a hoax, somebody just pulling my leg.
Oh, right. Okay.
My first initial reaction was, yeah, right. Okay. So then I started to do a little background research, as I do. And I found out, well, everything looks right. Let me send an email back. And so we started a conversation. That was, I think, in November of 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And right. I remember it was still before 2015 for a lot of reasons. So in 2014, he's talking about leaving, the band, completely leaving Blink-182. There's making, noises about that. And he had talked already to another author, an Englishman who's a Shakespeare scholar called Andrew Hartley. And Andrew Hartley is a professor of Shakespeare at, I think, the University of North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. But he's also a very successful novelist. So I see. Tom's approach was going to be twofold. He was going to have somebody do a series of novels, 3 novels, a trilogy based on the material that he was going to collect. And then someone, that would be me, writing a trilogy of nonfiction based on the material that we were collecting and the guidance we were getting from the people we were talking to. But more than that, Tom was extremely passionate when we spoke. We would speak on the phone for hours at a time, and he would say he wants to do this and this. He wants to get to these people. He wants to get into NASA, get into the DOD. He wants to find people, and knock down doors and find out what the truth is after all this time. He was confident he could do that, partially, I suppose, based on his celebrity, but also the fact that he did have people that he had cultivated over the years with the band who had connections, right? So some guy who knows some guy who knows some guy. So living in that world, he felt that he was able to do this, and he wanted my help on the nonfiction side to provide the kind of, I suppose, credibility, stability, whatever, where the data was concerned in the facts, because I think he liked that presentation we did in Amsterdam when we were doing the Amsterdam thing where we met. My presentation was about UFOs, but it was from the historical perspective and the way I got into it, which was not from being fascinated with UFOs per se, although I always had, in the background this fascination, but the idea that all these political people, important figures in our history in the 20th century were somehow involved in the UFO phenomenon. That's what brought me really into the subject matter. And I think he saw that and he realized, okay, this is the approach that we need, on that side. So that's how he contacted me in 2014. And I believe we signed up together. I signed a contract to write 3 books for standard, author's royalty and the whole thing. And that's the only, by the way, financial involvement or whatever you want to call it that I have with To the Stars. I'm not an employee of TTSA. I'm not an official spokesperson for TTSA.
You're simply a co-author with Tom DeLonge.
With Tom DeLonge, yeah.
Project. Okay.
And that's the extent of it. But
that's
the nice
what I
thing
thought, actually. I mean, because of your connection to him, I assume you did have some insight into TTSA, but I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that, I had just decided to throw my, credentials, reputation out the window and get a big paycheck and represent TTSA. That's not that at all. I mean, I'm writing these books with Tom, and it's based on the research that we're gathering. And this kind of access on my own, I would not have. So this is excellent for me because I'm getting a clearer picture as to what's really going on, behind the scenes, what people really know or what they're willing to say they know. And it's much better than simply reading somebody's blog or, trying to hope that somebody who says that they have secret connections really has those secret connections that they can't talk about. But here's the truth, quote unquote. So getting it in a more direct fashion from people, some of whom I've known of for years, people that I respected, was invaluable for me.
So are we able to talk about any of these connections or sources that Tom was able to cultivate? I mean, are these all secret sources or are they out in the open? I guess I'm curious how he was able to acquire these sources that he did. Did he contact them? Did they contact him? How did this happen? How did he gather such a group of sources around him to work off of this information?
Well, Tom is the prime mover in this thing. I think people don't understand that quite as well. They think he's some sort of a puppet, figurehead, and everybody else is doing their thing. And that can't be further from the truth. I'm in contact constantly with everybody there at TTSA. And there's one thing that everybody realizes right away is that Tom is the guy running the show. How did he get in contact with these people? Well, it's a bit like I said. It's a bit the way journalists do it, right? They cultivate one source. That source leads to another, which leads to another. It was really just like you would if you were working for the Washington Post or the New York Times. You cultivate one source that you happen to have, and that source will then lead you to another and to another. And so the sources that he was cultivating in 2015 in particular were people that he had met that way.
I'm thinking of General William McCaslin, for example, who was the commander of the Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson. And there was General Michael Carey of the U.S. Space Command, and Robert Weiss, who was head of Lockheed Skunk Works. Those are the big three. So Tom just reached out to contact those individuals. They didn't find him.
No, nobody went looking for Tom. I think that's the one misconception I'd like to lay to rest. It wasn't that Tom was sitting there, thinking, well, I love UFOs, and he started getting phone calls from people. It didn't work that way. Tom expressed his interest broadly. I mean, he went to a lot of people, spoke to a lot of people, had contacts in various ways with government and et cetera. So this was not a question of people running after Tom and saying, can you do us a favor and create TTSA? That couldn't be further from the truth. If you know what we went through. Yes.
Well, I think you're making a really important point here, because it's been alleged over and over again. I mean, you hear this all the time that, as you said, Tom's being played as a puppet, being manipulated by the intelligence community, and they want to get a particular message out, a very pro-military message, which in fact I think is part of what he's saying here. But what you're saying is, no, this is his initiative 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, I was there from the beginning of that, and I was privy to a lot of the communications and all the rest of it. I met some of the people. It was obvious that this was Tom's initiative, and people were sort of looking at each other and saying, well, how far can we trust him? And, we want to make sure that if we're involved with this thing, that the right story gets out, et cetera, that he's not going to go off on a tangent somewhere. And he's not. And the other thing, too, I don't talk specifically about that first group of quote unquote advisors that were revealed during the WikiLeaks thing with Podesta,
right.
because I promised, as well as Tom and everyone else that was involved with this, not to reveal sources. I mean, that's something that you really have to stand by no matter what comes along. If someone says, do not expose me, you do not expose them, no matter how much you really want to.
No, you can't. I agree.
You can't.
Yeah.
So I don't. So when it comes to that, I don't. I mean, the newspapers were full of stuff, and, the whole, we met Podesta. There's no secret about the fact that in July of 2015, we actually sat down in Washington with John Podesta to tape him and interview him about this entire subject. And we did that. And you've seen photographs of it, I'm sure, all over the internet. There's a lot of misconception about all of that. There's this idea that, Podesta was sort of pulling the strings as well. And that can't be further from the truth at all. We had it was like pulling teeth to get some information out of Podesta where the UFO stuff was concerned, because there were things he could not discuss. And the campaign was just starting as well at that time. So there's a lot of misconception. The Podesta leaks had, I think, the emails that were coming into Podesta, but not those going out, because I think they just hacked the inbox, not the outbox, or the sent mail, or whatever it is. I don't know. Or maybe they're holding back more. But.
Well, because with the WikiLeaks release, I mean, there are no Podesta communications going back to Tom that I don't think anyone has seen.
No, there haven't been.
And so the one inference one can make is that Podesta was basically just letting Tom talk and not really saying a whole lot. But
that's the problem. That's the problem with this kind of conspiracy theorizing. Just take a breath, look at the emails, and realize they all were inbox emails, right? Not outbox emails. So that's one thing. The other thing is he was obviously involved in the campaign. After we sat down with him in July of 2015, then the campaign kicked off in earnest shortly thereafter. The guy was damn busy, right? So he's running Hillary Clinton's campaign. He was the campaign chair.
That's right.
So he had a lot on his plate. But although that was going on, we were still talking to other people, still talking to the other advisors and other people like that, trying to get their guidance as to which directions we should go in and all of that. So the whole thing didn't die. What happened, however, was when the WikiLeaks dump was made public, everybody went dark, right? So Tom went dark immediately. And I remember frantic telephone calls from Jimmy Church, where's Tom? Where's Tom? And the thing is that Tom had unplugged everything. Tom had, closed down his emails, closed down his phone, all the rest of it, because we didn't know what other shoes were going to drop. We didn't know if more emails were going to be released. We didn't know who was behind this. Quite frankly, we didn't know if it was, for instance, Russians. So there was that, security implications and all the rest of it. So we said, okay, that's it. For now, we're going dark. We're going to sit and we're going to think about how we're going to proceed. But we never at any point said, okay, that's it. We're going to give up. The idea was, okay, this is burned. Now we're going to have to go in another direction and see if we can find other people to talk to and get this ball rolling again.
I got it.
Thankfully, we had made so many contacts, not just the ones that were in the emails, but so many other contacts and so many other people that we were able to sort of bring our network live again, although it was missing some important players. But we brought the network live again, and we started to develop our original mission, which was to create this entity, this To the Stars.
Mm-hmm. Can I thank you? That's actually very, very clear. I just want to tell people we're going to skip we're not doing commercial break at the bottom of the hour. Race has just said to me we're going to go right on through to the top of the hour, then we'll take a quick break at that time. And I just want to go back to Podesta before we move on to the second iteration of the team. You mentioned that there were things that John Podesta did not want to talk about, and I'm relating to UFOs. And So my mind is wondering here: is this because some of these things that were just fully classified within the national security community, or was it a political issue? He didn't want to talk about them publicly due to his connection with Hillary Clinton at that time. Are you able to clarify that at all or expand on that?
Yeah, I believe it had more to do with classified information and Podesta not being sure what he could or couldn't talk about, or being sure what he couldn't talk about and didn't want to. But what he did do, which is what some of our other people have done in the past with this program, is they will talk around it in a certain way as to lead you to the right direction, even though they can't tell you bluntly. For instance, he would tell us about, for instance, can the president demand everything that there is on the UFO phenomenon? When you're elected, you get into the Oval Office like Clinton allegedly did,
right,
and say, "Give me everything on the Kennedy assassination and on the UFOs,"
right?
And the problem Podesta told us was that you can't do it that way. The government is so bureaucratic and it's so stovepiped all over the place that there's no one place to go to. But if you know who to ask and specifically what to ask for, nobody can deny the president that information. He's the president. He's the supreme person in the country. He should have access to everything that he needs to have access to.
It's like being a good Freedom of Information Act researcher. You've got to know exactly what department to go to, what question to ask to get the right answer. Otherwise, you're out of luck.
Right. So if you go to the head of the Air Force, for instance, say, "Give me everything you have on the UFOs," the Air Force general is going to sit there and say, "Well, who do I contact about that now?" There's no big box marked UFO, right? So one group is going to have some information. Another group is jealously guarding its information. So he's got to go down to his, commanders and say, "Give me everything you have on UFOs going back, 20, 30, 50, 70 years. And then sit there and wait for like 100 years while they gather that material and then figure out what is classified, what's not classified, et cetera, et cetera. They have to be handled separately. Even though the president can see anything, the stuff's got to be handled in separate boxes, you might say. So you don't just dump all kinds of stuff on the president's desk, bring in a whole bunch of file cabinets and say, "Here you go." So there has to be some way to organize the material, figure out what is classified, declassified, figure out what it pertains to national security issues, and on and on. So there's a lot of nonsense. And then you got to, you can ask the Joint Chiefs, but then the Joint Chiefs are stuck. Now they're going to have the same problem. They're going to go back to their respective branches of service and say, "What do we know about UFOs?" So you're likely going to get a blank stare from a lot of guys. I don't know. We'll go and find out, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not going to happen fast. It's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take time. And it's even more time for the rest of us outside that system who have no clue how that classification process works. And Podesta was very, generous with information when he could be. And he said, there's a real problem with the classification process. He said, if you get two documents on your desk and one is marked classified and one isn't, which one are you going to read first? Right? You're going to read the classified document, right? Of course.
Absolutely. Sure.
So if you want your memo to be read, you're going to mark it classified, even though it's about lunch, right? It doesn't matter. You mark it, and now you got a problem because now that document has to go through a declassification process and maybe wait 25 years, which is the statutory length, before you can undergo a declassification. I mean, it's a mess. And Podesta was very open. He says, yeah, it is a mess, especially.
And a lot of these classified documents are really a supreme waste of time. You don't, even within that world, and most of that stuff is irrelevant. I had a conversation a number of years ago with a man who was actually very prominent within the CIA and very, very involved in the UFO phenomenon, very interested in it, and just told me about conversations he had in his retirement with former presidents, secretaries of defense, CIA directors, and I believe he said undersecretaries of defense. So very high level, like the highest level of people in the national security community. He's on a first name basis with them all. And the conversations that he had with each one of these one-on-one were about UFOs/ET and everything related. And he just said to me that the answers, the types of responses he got fell into three basic categories. A very small group of individuals said, UFOs, what's wrong with you? You're out of your mind. Stop wasting your time with that nonsense. Another small group, but slightly larger, said, oh, yes, I was briefed on this. This is what I know. What do you know? They were, I think they might have shared some information. And then the largest group, and again, these are people at the top of the hierarchy, said essentially UFOs, oh my God, I've been wanting to get information on this for the longest time, have failed, what do you know? What can you tell me? Now, so when he said this to me, I just said, well, so what does this imply? I mean, he says, what do you think? I said, well, it seems like the highest level of people are being locked out and that there's someone behind them that's got the information. He said, that is my assumption as well. We're talking Bilderberg type, high level privatization, who knows, but presumably something beyond the president, and something that the sense that I have gotten over the years is that it's beyond the formal classified world, dealing with extra governmental or non-governmental types of activities. And I'm just wondering, I mean, do you get this sense at all when you were talking with people like Podesta or any of the other folks that you were speaking about, talking within the classified world about this?
Not exactly that way. One of the problems is if you're not read into a program, you don't know anything about it. So if it's not your job, you're most likely never going to hear about it. Now, you may hear scuttlebutt, you may hear rumors and gossip, but if you're in a program that has nothing to do with UFOs and you're not, cleared for that kind of information, you'll never have it, no matter how high your security, clearances go. If you're not read into that program, you're not going to know it exists. Basically, there's not like a list of programs. You can see this one and not that one. You'll never even know the program exists because you're not supposed to know. There's a need to know basis. That doesn't mean that the UFO phenomenon is like ultra top secret, stratospheric level or something. It may just simply be a basic secret classified project, but nobody's read in on it except a handful of people. So that's the way the government works. It's clandestine, but it's also Byzantine, and it's a bureaucracy and it's kind of a mess. It's unwieldy. So yes, there may very well be people who have much better knowledge and information about UFOs that they're not sharing with everyone else. I'm not getting the feeling that there's this kind of cabal. There are people who do know more, and they're both in the private sector and in the public sector. Mm-hmm. They're both in government and in industry, but also they're people like us. I mean, everybody who has had a UFO contact experience has a piece of the puzzle, right? And right. They've been quote unquote read in, on that part, on their experience. So it's not something where you could actually classify all the knowledge on UFOs and hide it someplace deep within the Pentagon because so many other people have access to it. And if you look at it from that point of view, you realize that, yes, there are people who are going to know more about it, maybe people who have access to more avenues than we do. They have access to the industrial, to the skunk works people, and they have access to other things around the country. But then you have another aspect, and that's international. What do the Chinese know? What do the Russians know? What do the Brazilians and the French and the English, et cetera? Everybody has had contact. Every country has had a UFO phenomenon take place within their borders. And they're all, I think, scratching their heads too. Disclosure is not just up to us in the United States. China could disclose tomorrow if they wanted to, if they were able to. But they may be as much in the dark as people in Russia, as people in Brazil and the rest of it. They may have photographs, they may have videotapes, they may have, sessions with contactees, all the same material we have. And they may have a little bit better angle on it from a scientific point of view, from an engineering point of view, maybe. Maybe their culture is more open to certain specific types of experiences than ours is. That's another issue to consider. So I think we need everybody to get together for this disclosure thing. It can't be purely an American fixation. It can't be American-centric. And I think that once we develop this idea that there's a cabal in Washington or somewhere controlling all this information, we tend to forget all the other countries.
Oh, I fully agree with the sentiments you just expressed about the international nature of this, and the fact that there are other nations in this world that have information, particularly Russia and China, who are outside the formal U.S. Structure of power. Other nations are really not outside that structure of power, but Russia and China certainly are. Yeah, a lot to think about there. I want to just finish up on Podesta. One final thing, if you don't mind, which is, did you get a sense of John Podesta's motivations in communicating with Tom DeLonge, and in particular, a sense of whether or not John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, for that matter, were really serious about doing some form of UFO disclosure? Did you or did Tom, folks you were working with get this sense that they wanted to promote a genuine disclosure of the UFO subject to the world if she were elected president?
My feeling was yes, and for a couple of reasons. One, because he did sit down and talk to us for hours on this particular subject without revealing, sources and methods. But
Right.
as far as, what we figured his motivation must be sitting down and talking to us was because he sincerely believed in this. But everybody at that point was believing that Hillary would win. So if Hillary had won, Podesta's documentary with us and his interview with us would be part of that package, right? So it would be very hard to walk back from that. You could only walk back from that if he hadn't won, right? So you would, you can't walk back. If Hillary wins and Tom DeLonge, of all people, has John Podesta on tape saying, yes, he believes that the government knows more, there's more somewhere buried within the stovepipes of all the government agencies, that we can really get at it and really start to make a concerted effort to get this out there. Podesta himself believed that it was really a serious mistake to keep the secrecy from the people, to maintain this level of secrecy. Cold War is over, et cetera, et cetera. So my sentiments that I got from Podesta were just exactly that. He wanted this to come out. And I don't think it was purely like, I want to get the UFO vote. I don't think that was very big necessarily, or like, a swing demographic, But I think he was really, I think he was sincere about it. And we know that Hillary met with Lawrence Rockefeller. We know there was this, the underground underneath, there was this bubbling idea that there was more to it and that it would come out. And since then, if you see Podesta's occasional tweets on the subject, he's still there. He retweets like George Knapp stuff and everything. So he's still there.
Yeah, well, I guess I have a different sense of it than you do, but of course I have not spoken with Podesta, so I certainly recognize that you may have a point here, and I appreciate what you're saying because you're giving me a perspective that is different than what I have had about Podesta and Hillary Clinton on this subject. So what I have been thinking, and what I still think that I believe, but I'm going to really think about this now, is I actually never thought that Hillary Clinton was ever really serious about doing a true UFO disclosure. And I actually never believed that Podesta was serious about doing anything more than getting the UFO vote. And I know you laughed about that, but I don't think that's trivial anymore. I really believe that this is different from, say, back in 2008 when the UFO issue completely torpedoed, say, Dennis Kucinich in his candidacies, if you remember that. It just destroyed him. Not that he had much of a chance against the Democratic Party machine anyway, but the fact is that subject just sunk him immediately. But between 2008 and 2016, or 2015, in fact, was, the whole explosion of social media and YouTube and Facebook, and a very unspoken but definite sea change in culture, in my own opinion anyway, that made some astute individuals like Podesta realize that the UFO subject is not necessarily the third rail, particularly for Hillary Clinton, who basically got a pass from the New York Times or any of the mainstream media. They were never going to attack her over her interest in UFOs, and he knew that. So I thought that he actually saw this as a real issue that could help make her be a little more cool for the public. She needed that. She was running against Bernie Sanders, and he was killing her in terms of enthusiasm. So I actually thought that the UFO issue was perceived as a campaign benefit for Hillary Clinton. I still think it was, actually.
But those two things are not mutually exclusive, right?
No, I agree. But the question that I guess I ask is, what was the real motivation that Podesta had? And the reason I think that is because I have never succeeded in wrapping my head around the fact that a man as well plugged in as John Podesta would be ignorant of the radical, I would say revolutionary nature of the end of UFO secrecy and how disruptive that the end of such secrecy would be. He's astute enough to understand this. And for that reason, I've just not been able to understand a proper motivation that he or Hillary Clinton or any of the top level of the power elite would have in terms of giving this secret up. I clearly am missing something if he's serious about this. And if she was serious about this, then I must be missing something. And can you tell me what I'm missing in that analysis? Like, why would they do it if, I just don't see their motivation.
Well, I mean, I think we have to step back a little bit. And we're talking about disclosure. That's a heavily loaded term, and we kind of throw it around. I think everybody has their own idea what that means. Mm-hmm. When it comes to disclosure, I don't think that what was going to happen is Hillary out of the Oval Office, the day after the inauguration is going to say, guess what? There's UFOs, there's aliens, and they live in the basement. I think she was going to move the ball down the field. I think that's what John and Hillary both wanted to do, was move that ball down the field a lot further than it had been by releasing more documents, releasing the ATIP material, for instance, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Move that out there, get it out there. And there was an undercurrent to that as well. And Podesta made that clear. When I brought up the fact that other countries had more proactive seeming agencies where the UFO was concerned, government agencies and people coming out in government saying yes, there's UFOs, and he said different governments. He says different type of democracies. He said our democracy needs people in the streets. I'm rephrasing what he says. Don't quote me, but he was saying basically we need the people to get out there and demand this action from their elected representatives. He says elected representatives are basically going, to where the line of least resistance is. So they're going to go and support things that they know are going to get backed by their constituents. And if it's unpopular or it doesn't make sense, they may not do it, no matter what their feelings are. And I think we see that all the time. So if we were able to get the people to demand greater UFO transparency, and do it intelligently, and go after Congress and say, we need more information. We need this to be done, now rather than later. It would happen. And Podesta kind of let us believe that that's something that was going to be necessary. That's necessary in our democracy for the people to press our elected officials to demand that out of the government.
This was something that you were essentially saying to me a week ago when we were together at the event Contact in the Desert, and you were really kind of indicating that Podesta wanted quietly to promote this, but wanted to keep his fingerprints, as it were, off direct action, more or less. I think that's kind of what you were saying.
Well, I didn't say it quite that. That sounds very sinister. And although I study conspiracies all the time, I'm just not that conspiratorial.
I don't think that was conspiratorial. I just think he politically wanted to keep himself a little bit, keep it on the DL, as it were, while other people were really doing the heavy lifting. And that was the impression that I got from you. Yeah,
but he gave an interview to Tom DeLonge. I mean, he wasn't that, arm's length about it. If he was sitting there talking to a rock star, that he knew was going to turn this into a documentary and a film and all the rest of it. So I don't know, I mean, it's, okay. You can have both. They're not mutually exclusive. He may wanted to, manipulate this a certain way politically so that he wasn't out on the limb. But by the same token, Podesta is out on the limb. We all know his interest in UFOs. It's not a secret, I mean, it's
been out there for a long time. Very long time. Okay, well, that was very interesting, Peter. I'm actually very grateful that you were able to explain that as well as you did, and you've given me something to think about relating to how serious Podesta and Hillary, for that matter, were about doing a UFO disclosure. I will just state openly to you and to the world. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, that I just never took that claim seriously. I never believed that Hillary Clinton was going to be a serious UFO disclosure president, and you're giving a different take on it that I respect, and I'm going to really think about this. So that's the main thing I'm going to say to you is you've given me something to think about, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I'm not sure that I'm there yet, but I'm going to think about this because you've given it a really good kind of package, the way you put it together. Can we move on then and move? So the original group that Tom was with disbanded. We're talking, McCaslin, Carey, and Robert Weiss, and these are not people I think that you said you interacted with anyway, if I'm not mistaken. You did not.
Not directly. No.
Yeah. So they left, and that was a very impressive group of people. I mean, one of DeLonge's emails famously to Podesta was about I think it was about McCaslin, and he basically just said this guy who's the real deal. He wasn't speaking openly about it, but he was he knew a lot, was deeply involved. Said he was a skeptic. He's not a skeptic. I've been working with him on this for months. That was probably the most famous WikiLeaks memo on this, and talking about the reality of Roswell and all of this is what DeLonge said to John Podesta in relation to General William McCasland. So I thought that was actually quite fascinating. I mean, quite fascinating. And I have not heard a peep out of McCasland or any of these other guys since, as you say, they went dark. So I think that's unfortunate. But can I ask you about the second version of the teams? This is To the Stars with people like Hal Puthoff is someone who I do know, Jim Semivan, Christopher Mellon, Luis Elizondo, the rest of the crew. I'm curious about how that was put together and the relationship of all of this to the New York Times article that followed about 2 months after. Are you able to speak to that phase of the putting together of the TTSA team?
I mean, in general outline terms, sure. I wasn't there for the day-to-day.
Right.
You know, as I say, I was writing all the other nonfiction stuff and Secret Machines and all of that. So, but
Yeah, sure.
During that time, however, as this was all coming together, of course, I've known of Hal for a long time, and I was able to, I wrote about him in Sinister Forces, and I was able to actually to meet Hal and Chris Mellon and Jacques Vallée at a meeting, I think it was in 2016, as we were putting together, the second iteration of the To the Stars Academy, and talking to all of them and hearing the interesting stories they had to tell and all the rest of it. I think it was kind of ad hoc. It was, again, the people that Tom had contacted, for instance, the first group of people, those are the people that were revealed, in the WikiLeaks. There were a lot of other people involved, just not just the ones, in the emails, obviously. So there were other people that he knew, we knew, and that he made contacts with. And after WikiLeaks went dark, one thing I think people understood, number one, that Tom was telling the truth. That he had advisors he was working with, which everybody laughed at when it was mentioned. But number two, that he was zealous in trying to protect sources, because these are very big names, and he never said a whisper about them himself. So I think people realized that Tom was, number one, credible, but also number two, that he really just did take the idea of protecting sources very seriously, right? So I think people felt a bit more relaxed, ironically, after WikiLeaks in some cases, to talk to Tom, realize that he was serious about what he was doing. He was making high-level contacts. He was trying to be really fair to everyone. And he was trying to be fair. This is one thing I think that we miss in this narrative, where people think that Tom is pro-military or trying to promote a military version of the UFO phenomenon. And that's not exactly true. It's not that he's pro-military. He's simply not anti-military. So one of the approaches that he took to people who were involved in the military-industrial complex was a non-confrontational one. He went to them and said, listen, I'm not here to say, you fools, you're keeping the secrets from us. Damn you all. Right. He was going up there asking simply, listen, guys, we know you know more than you've told us. We understand that during the Cold War, that might have been a necessity, that there were reasons why UFOs were considered to be Russians or Chinese, or you use that as an excuse to disguise the stuff. We don't know. All the details were not read in. We don't have classification. We don't have clearances. So what can you tell us? Just don't lie to us, but tell us what you can. Tell us if we're on the right track. Point us in the right track if you can, and we will protect sources if you want to tell us anything, and et cetera, et cetera. And that took a lot of work and a lot of convincing. But the idea that he took a non-confrontational attitude has been misinterpreted as Tom believing in 100% in the military analysis. However, that said, the only analysis we're really getting is from the military-industrial complex, right? So the videos that came out are from the military, and it's Skunkworks who's working on trying to figure out how these things fly and all the rest of it. So you have the military-industrial complex sitting on a lot of information and a lot of perspective. And we kind of have to respect that. From my point of view as a researcher, this is a gold mine of information, potentially. I'm just seeing, the strains of gold in the coal dust here, but I'm looking, and I know it's there. I know there's more there, maybe not a lot more, but there is more. And, we're trying to get it out. We're trying to do it in a legal way without using leakers and that kind of stuff, and bribing people to dump documents or something like that, because, and this is very important, because we want this to be the official acknowledgement of the UFO phenomenon. That was really, really important. We could have leaked stuff, we could have speculated, we could have made stuff up like everybody does. But we wanted to make sure that this stuff was coming straight from the horse's mouth, and that the government would finally say, indirectly, if not directly, that yes, there are UFOs, and yes, we've been studying them, and guess what? We don't know what the hell they are either. And that for us was a major holy grail.
We're going to come to a break very shortly, and I want to return to this point, Peter. I guess that what I would just say in responding to what you're saying is that I would understand absolutely why, if you're going to be cultivating military sources, intelligence community sources, you're not going to go at them, in this highly confrontational approach, accusing them of covering up the truth and the kind of things that, we've heard this from Stephen Greer is a perfect case in point, who will go after the military and talk about how the cabal is hiding the information from the public and so forth, how the extraterrestrials are essentially benign and good. The military is the bad guys in that scenario. And there are a lot of other people who will kind of hold variations of that. So it's not surprising. Like if you're going to cultivate the military for information, you don't want to alienate them, and as a result, you'll get something of a skewed, let me just say skewed pro-military-ish type of perspective. I guess the fear or the concern that a lot of people had was that if there was going to be a kind of drip disclosure that the military, the government, or intel community was going to have, they would absolutely want to have the right kind of spin to put themselves in the best possible light in terms of why the secrecy happened. And so I think the fear that people have had is that Tom was being used by the military for that purpose, essentially as a CYA rule for them, and to keep the most positive spin on the cover-up that they possibly could.
If that was the purpose, then they blew it.
Well, they blew it in terms of the research, the UFO research community. If that's what you're
no, they blew it. Lou Elizondo is one of the most upfront, open people about what and how and why this was all going down. I mean, there's no effort at concealment. Elizondo is saying, look, we didn't know what it was. The whole purpose of this thing was to figure out these were enemy aircraft. Obviously, that's their job. It's the Pentagon, right? Yeah. So their job is not the State Department. If the State Department was doing this, a different story. But it's the military, and the military's only perspective is this a threat or not?
Right. I want to come back to this. We're at the top of the hour, so let's just take a quick break. We'll have a few minutes, catch our breath. Race has got a couple of promos to put on, and Peter, you and I will come back at the top of the hour, and I would love to continue this with you. I'm very much enjoying this. I'm here with Peter Levenda, an outstanding researcher and co-author with Tom DeLonge, and we're talking about, a lot of things, but primarily the To the Stars Academy and everything associated with it. Stick around. I'm Richard Dolan. This is The Richard Dolan Show on KGRA. We're back. I'm Richard Dolan here with my guest, Peter Levenda. Just having such a really enjoyable time talking with you about these issues, Peter. And I sense that you're happy to be able to get your messaging out, if that's the word that I can use here, amid all of the critiques that DeLonge and TTSA have been taking all this time.
Well, sure. I mean, I did a presentation on this at Contact in the Desert. So my presentation was on To the Stars and all the conspiracy theories around it. Right. So I was gearing up for this for a couple of weeks in advance, so I knew what was coming. And, it's kind of humorous. I mean, those of us who were in it are sort of scratching our heads at some of the stories that come out about, cabals and the deep state and who's manipulating whom and all the rest of it. And I suppose, as someone who wrote 3 volumes on sinister forces, I suppose you could say that somehow, cosmically, there's some sort of weird alignment of sinister forces that's manipulating the situation. But consciously, those of us who are involved, in the ones that I've met and talked with, that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, there's a lot of disparate ideas, disparate approaches to the material. But one thing is consistent through all of these individuals is that they're really basing their points of view on the phenomenon on data, on factual data, whether it's scientific data or data they received through, military sources or whatever, intelligence sources. But everything is based on data. And while they may not always discuss things, they never discuss things they can't discuss, things that are classified, you can tell from their point of view just how much they know, but also what the phenomenon is to them, right? The contours of it as they understand it. And that's what is very valuable to me, because I also don't have skin in this game, really. I came into it from a different perspective. I came into it from the history, the historical perspective. I wanted to know what the relationship was there. But as I have gone along with it, the implications are astounding. And I've always believed, as I said in Amsterdam, as I've said before, I've never seen a UFO. I've never had a close encounter, but the evidence is overwhelming. So, of course, I agree and acknowledge there is a UFO phenomenon, and it's not of this world as we understand it. So we're all on the same page at To the Stars where that's concerned.
I really want to get into some of the implications of what you just said a little bit later in this program, because it's really the reason that I've continually been involved in the UFO phenomenon all these years, because of those profound implications that you just referred to, and they are very important. Before we go there, I just wanted to mention that I think I said earlier, I've known Hal Puthoff for, oh my goodness, maybe 15 years or so. And I've had a number of deep conversations with him. And I must say that I consider him a man of very deep thought on the subject of UFOs. And he's always struck me as someone who's gained a great deal of knowledge about it. And I've always sensed as like working his own way through the labyrinth, trying to get, a little more information and a little more information. And I suspect, I don't know James Semivan or Chris Mellon or Luis Elizondo, but I've developed a very strong feeling that they're in a similar position. Like they're not necessarily in the innermost of the innermost circles as far as the subject matter goes. I've just never got that sense. I've always sensed that they are maybe knocking at the door of that innermost sanctum or close to that innermost sanctum of the real greatest amount of knowledge. But that they've had some knowledge, and that knowledge that they've acquired is significant. And I think this is what happens with people in the military and the intelligence community who've had some kind of intersection with the UFO phenomenon. I'm not one of that community, but I know a number of those people, and I've always sensed that they see each other as kindred spirits, or as brothers in arms, as it were, or brothers and sisters in arms, that they've got this interest. And there's always been this kind of quiet, invisible college among people in that field, not necessarily formal relationships, but quiet conversations. 25, 30 plus years ago, this is what the aviary actually was, the infamous aviary that people like to talk about. And I've done my own research into that, and it's simply, as far as everything that I've been able to find out, it's an informal collection of people in the intelligence community who knew something about UFOs and like to talk to each other about it. And that's the impression I get with this group of individuals that Tom DeLonge has organized. They're very impressive people, Puthoff, Semivan, Mellon. But I've just never got the idea that they're like the innermost, highest level of insiders.
Is that a question?
No, I thought you might respond to it. Yeah, I probably should have asked it as a question. Do you agree?
Rephrase as a question, please, for $200. I don't know that there is an innermost sanctum. I would posit that innermost sanctum is the truth about UFOs. I think that's what is so hard to breach for all of us. It's to get on the other side of that curtain. I think the direct experience is not like anything we know or understand. Therefore, the people who have had that direct experience are not necessarily in the military or the intelligence agencies or anything else.
I get it.
So I think that those pilots in the F-18s who saw the Tic Tacs,
right,
and something that went on for a week, and we won't get into it. I know you want to get into it later, but just that if you just look at that, that there is more information contained there than probably in a bunch of other people's books, not yours, Richard, about the UFO.
No, that's unbelievable.
Do you know what I mean?
Incredible excitement, and we do want to talk about this.
But I think that's where the cabal is. I think unless we're going to go, full X-Files on this, and I think there's a bunch of guys with cigars in a room, filled with smoke, and they have all the real data, and an alien body may be in a piece of a saucer, and and they know it. But if we posit a cabal in the United States, again, I go back to that same story. There must be the same cabal in Russia and in China and everywhere else. Yeah. And how come nobody's talking?
Well, I actually do believe that there are, I guess I would call it a cabal. I mean, I don't know if that's the best word, but I do think that they do exist. And I do think they exist because I personally believe that they have acquired hardware. And not simply whatever Bigelow's got. We can talk about that, but I think long before Bigelow, the evidence for this has been very, very strong, my own view. And if you've got hardware, then you've got a cabal, because by its very nature, you've got hardware, you've got technology that did not originate here, and that's a cover-up. Now, that doesn't mean that they have every single answer. I mean, I'm sure they don't. I'm sure they absolutely don't, and that they are mystified on many aspects of this, just like anyone else. But I do think that they've got something. They've got proof. They've got absolute information that this is a real phenomenon originating from somewhere not here, and that's a cabal, in my view. And that's
but that video tells it, that there is a technology coming from someplace else that is beyond our understanding of physics and science, and it's out there, and it's been out there since December.
I mean, agreed. But now, what we need, of course, is to tack that on with an actual official statement from maybe Donald Trump or some other high-level international figure who's going to say, yes, as a matter of fact, that's real. And by the way, we've known about this for X number of years. I mean, that's what really we need to change the public discussion.